what is outdoor learning and why is it important in schools?
Well, I've basically been thinking a lot about this and thinking the two sort of tracks. One is the outdoor education track, which is the more traditional, learning skills like packing, climbing, build campfires, pitching tents, and that's more your traditional outdoor. But along what you're talking about, I think is education outdoors, and I think that one is the one that pretty much anyone at any school could do in some capacity, whether it's taking a literature or an art lesson outside or taking a music lesson outside. Basically, any sort of curriculum item can go out on the campus to an outdoor space or a nearby park or even on a weekend and get kids outdoors learning. So just getting outside and doing some sort of lesson, whether it's a traditional math lesson, but using, natural areas or natural spaces. And I think why it's important and why I think I want to make the distinction is I find that a lot of teachers are really afraid of outdoor education. But if you tell them it's education outdoors, that might ease their mind a bit and let them know that they can do it without special equipment, without special training, just take their normal lesson outside.
I suppose it's just reframing it slightly, I suppose, isn't it? For a bit more sort of tangible, I suppose. Yeah. Any other thoughts on that?
As we're gearing up for a Week Without Walls experience, which is really increasingly common, not new by any means, but common in international schools, when I think about this question, I think about my main talking points for parents about why they should be excited about letting us take their kids, sometimes out even out of the country for our high school students for Week Without Walls trips. And that's really an opportunity to take healthy risks and achieve that growth that happens best when kids are outside of their comfort zones. Our students are often quite privileged in the international school setting, and there's real opportunity to challenge them in a healthy way. Outdoor education and experiential learning works best, when it has a clear purpose, whether that's tied to a curriculum goal or it's got a service or an adventure component. And it gives kids an opportunity that may not be your traditional classroom academic stars to really thrive in much the same way sports or the arts might. And that's one of the huge payoffs or benefits that I see as we take kids outside of school. I often show parents clips of graduation speeches from valedictorians when they talk about their Week Without Walls trips and the impacts that they had on them, and sometimes accomplishing things that they didn't previously think they could do. And they carry those kind of skills and life lessons with them, I think, to be more confident young adults as they, not too long after that, venture off to university.
Fantastic.
I think also we live in a society that has a higher ability to live a kind of sedate lifestyle. You can work from a computer, you can work from an office, you can work from home, so much more these days. You go back just 20 years really, and a lot more people, it was a lot more normal just to be outdoors, kind of like what Kenny and Chris were saying, being educated outdoors. It was more of a normal thing, and now it's become more of a niche thing in some ways. And I think with all the knowledge that we now have, that mental health is connected to your physical health and your well-being, and that outdoor spaces really contribute to that, it's important that certainly our young people, the next generation, grasp that and have a good understanding that their health is linked to the planet and vice versa, and being outdoors is a very healthy way of living your life.
I think I agree with what everybody said, and with the early years, I feel that children have the opportunity to be active and to have real life experience. Sometimes they stay indoors, and with the pandemic, it was like they were locked inside their houses. And we noticed that behavior improved a lot, children's engagement in the activities, and the way we can give them different types of opportunities, right? And they are very young, so sometimes it's hard to go outside But if we take the opportunity to take them to the outdoors of the school and enhance according to their interest and explore the nature around, it's amazing, and it's a real life experience. So one of the things we can get from outdoor learning, I think that it's to bring real life to children's experience in school and developing skills.
Fantastic. And we touched on some of the real key benefits there, and sort of looking at from your different contexts and experiences, do sort of schools globally have a sort of a dedicated in-house role for this? Do they use external suppliers solely, or is it sort of a bit of a balance between the two as to how they integrate outdoor learning into the institution, the curriculum? You know, what does that look like in your different contexts?
Yeah, I could probably talk on this. I've been a head of outdoor education in different schools around the UK, and often schools will have a dedicated outdoor educator. A lot of those roles are self-promoted. So and we've all seen this, you know, if there's a running club in the school, it's often because one of the teachers is a runner, and so, you know, they get the students involved. So those of us in leadership positions, you sometimes are, or you're not looking out for people to join your teaching cohort who have these extracurricular skills. But sometimes schools, especially maybe the state-led schools which have lower budgets, they're just looking to get by and just looking to kind of pass the numbers and get the job done. And so a lot of the time the outdoor education and the extracurricular things in general can be forgotten about, or just kind of not be prioritized. So often you need a champion in your school. Even if you're using an outdoor provider, often you need somebody to kind of start that program in the first place, because as we all know, there's often a lot of paperwork that goes with it, especially regarding risk assessments and safety and policies and procedures. So with the busy life of teachers, it can be a very big job if the leadership of the school hasn't designated or employed somebody to do that job, especially.
Any other
Yeah,
thoughts?
I was just gonna add, I've definitely seen both, but I've seen more of a trend of schools getting an in-house outdoor education role, or maybe a global citizenship role, or maybe a sustainability type role, and they often kind of fit together under outdoor ed or service learning. And it's usually one or two people, like Matt was saying, that are really dedicated. And the other part I've seen, like if you want to bring your whole grade level, like 200 kids at one time, you definitely have to find some outdoor providers, some third-party providers. And especially if you want to do some adventures, kayaking or rafting, most schools aren't going to have that equipment or that training. They're not going to have life jackets or rafts, and they'll seek out a third-party provider. And I think Matt's exactly right. Like a lot of the role nowadays for an outdoor ed sort of role or position at a school is making sure that those third-party providers are up to snuff, that they have risk assessments, they've got standard operating procedures, they've got policies, they've got emergency medicine training, some sort of wilderness first aid. And I'm seeing a bit more of both. I think in the good old days, 20 years ago, I used to just get a group of kids and I'd get a bus and just go lead my own trips. But I don't think that happens as much anymore. I think more and more schools are getting that role. At least that's what I've seen in Southeast Asia.
Chris, what about yourself?
Yeah.
Daniela?
So I think that most schools now, they have a balance. So they do have people responsible for organizing the trips in case it's an outdoor trip, but they also have suppliers. Here in Brazil, I know that depending on the number of students you're taking, you need a person that is trained as a tourist guide to accompany the trip as well. So I think it also depends on government, but usually I can see that we have a balance between the two of them, outside and inside.
Yeah, excellent. Any final thoughts there?
Yeah, we rely heavily on external providers, to be the risk assessors and the boots on the ground, the people with a higher level of medical training than my average teacher is going to have. They're really essential in that, because they know the areas that they work in, and can provide a safe trip. Whereas in-house, as Matt said, it's really important to have a champion. And then, sort of in my role in leadership, it's the job to try and make that sustainable, so it doesn't disappear if that champion maybe moves on to a different school, which we know in international education is quite a transient workplace. And so that is, putting policies and systems in place to make sure that even vetting external providers and making sure that, they have proper procedures in place to do risk assessments and medical certifications and all those things is in place. But yeah, we want the teachers who know the kids and know the curriculum to do a lot of the leadership there and provide, a good opportunity for the kids. That's the role kind of within the school. And then the external provider really putting together an awesome itinerary in collaboration with those teachers and providing that, safe, awesome environment once we land on the ground outside of the country. So both, but really with two pretty distinct, different roles. We do run some national trips that are predominantly teacher-led, but anything international, we're counting on an external provider.
Brilliant. Fantastic. And now I'm really sort of keen to look at some of the real key benefits and the sort of real life examples that each of you have sort of done in your own school context. So it'd be great to have a few examples of some sort of key outdoor learning strategies that each of you have tried and maybe had sort of really great impacts to your students. And then maybe looking at some maybe you have tried that maybe haven't landed as desired and maybe why that was. But yeah, it'd be great to hear some of those sort of key examples. Who'd like to kick off with that one?
I can start here. Early years, we work with the core books, and we have something called open learning. So during this time of the day, children from 3 to 6 years old, they can choose where they want to learn. So they can go outdoors or indoors. And we have continuous provision, and we also have some enhancements. So I think that success that we had last year was when we worked with the book We're Going on a Bear Hunt. So here in Brazil, it's usually very hot. We don't have the seasons, or it doesn't snow in São Paulo. And we made sure to prepare each environment outdoors with natural resources, so mud and ice, those different types of sensorial experience. And children, they just loved explore outdoors and have different sensations and have a better understanding of the natural environment from the book. I think that it gave them real experience from what the characters from the book were going through. So we tried to go with the wind and with the cold, and it was fantastic. It was very nice to see children's engagement and learning. And one of the things that didn't work last year as well, we worked with a picture book that is called Sidewalk Flowers. And we planned an outdoor trip to a park that was near our school. So it's in our neighborhood, and parents joined us. And the main reason for the trip was to go on a nature treasure hunt. And in the end, children, they were just like looking forward to spend time with parents. That was amazing. But they were trying to have picnic and play with the toys. So the natural hunt didn't work really well. But yeah, it was an amazing experience. But the main objective of the trip was not achieved.
Lots of learnings along the way, I imagine, though, and I suppose you can adapt that to the next trip you do, right? And yeah,
I've got one that I can share. I've got a little worksheet here, so if we can see on the camera, this is a worksheet that when I was a teacher, and we actually run this and give this to schools to use. It's a maths worksheet that takes the students outdoors. So, for example, in the environment where this was, there was lots of nettles on the school campus. And so it's got the nutritional information of a nettle next to it. And then it asks them some questions about the calorie content and how many nettles you would have to collect to give yourself 2,000 calories. And it's got like the percentages of water in there. So this is for a 14-year-old student to kind of grapple with in group work. And they can go out on the campus and they can forage and identify the materials and plants that they're looking for, and then answer the questions along the way. This worksheet's really good because it gets them identifying the outdoor environment, so they're learning about nature and what's around them, and then they're also doing something which fits into the curriculum. And this particular worksheet fits into the curriculum with maths, science, and also food tech and home economics as well. So one of the joys, one of the wonders, I think, of being in an outdoor environment is, and Kenny kind of touched on this a little bit, it lifts the restrictions of being focused on just one subject or one topic, and you can add a load together. On the back of the worksheet are, if necessary, some of the poisons that are in that environment. So, the students are also getting educated on the dangers of the environment, and they can risk assess, and then they can look after themselves when they're outdoors as well. If you guys want to copy this, I'm happy to send it out to everybody, and you can customize it and replace it with the plants that are in your local area and have a play around with it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt.
But I definitely have, a million ideas. But I'll just share a couple. I think some of the most important things we can do is just the plain old observation skills, like a sit spot where you just sit for 5 minutes and observe, either do some sort of sound mapping or some sort of sketching, or just do nothing at all and just listen and, focus, pay attention to what's around you. I think that's pretty crucial, because kids nowadays don't really have that opportunity. They're in front of screens or they're in a building, and they don't really tune in to natural sounds, natural odors, textures, feeling the mud, feeling the moss. So just engaging the senses, I think. I'm a big fan of scavenger hunts. I think you said yours didn't work, Daniela, but sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It just always depends. But I like sending kids out to find cool, nature scavenger hunts and things. And one of the things I think is crucial, and you won't believe this, but this is a true story. I had an IB graduate that was going to university standing with me on the riverbank, and he point blank said, "So how does the water get to the river?" And I was flabbergasted, because I know in grade 7 I teach the water cycle. It's a standard lesson. I know he was a really smart kid that had graduated with an IB diploma, but I don't think he had ever connected the academic book learning that he had, that was such a high level, to the real world, where he could see a watershed and see the clouds and stand on the slope and see how the condensation, precipitation, all that, watershed and water cycle terminology was real life. So I think making those connections are crucial, and just being outdoors and seeing what you've learned about in the textbook, experiencing it, gives you a context and gives meaning. So taking those lessons, whatever you've learned in the classroom, and translating it into an experience outside, I think that's probably the most important thing we can do.
I'll zoom back out to kind of a bigger, broader level. Great examples. In the planning, you really want to make sure that your trips are developmentally appropriate. When you're planning one, specifically if it's an international trip, I'm always talking about kind of trying to find that sweet spot where kids are challenged, but they're not miserable. If students live a life of comfort and privilege, a 7-night camp in the jungle for a grade 7 is probably not going to go very well. And our school, I know in the past, has had some trips that, probably push kids well beyond their comfort level. So with that really comes good planning. What is the clear mission or intent of the trip? Is it really service based? Is it adventure based? Is it team building based, which we like to do a lot of in middle school, because it's really that challenging time in the life where middle schoolers are trying to figure out their relationships and learn to be kind to everybody. So having a real clear intent, trying to find that right amount of challenge and activities that fit well for it, working with teachers to get them engaged where it fits within their curriculum, so that they have some buy-in and they're excited to attend the trips. And then getting the kids really excited about it as well, bringing kids in that are older that might have been on that trip in the past to kind of help be cheerleaders for it, or having parent testimonials, all of those things that kind of build the why for doing such a trip. And then just really great communication, I think, is essential throughout, to make parents feel comfortable that their child is first and foremost going to be safe and going to be learning, that it's worth them leaving school for potentially a week to engage in a week without walls trip or something similar. And what doesn't go well is if one of those pieces isn't in place, or you maybe misjudge your audience. For years, my school did trips to Nepal. It's just a 40-minute flight away to Kathmandu. We chose not to do a Nepal trip this year. There's an election coming up, and I'm happy we did. There was, of course, just the very recent tragic plane crash of Yeti Airlines, and that would have not gone over well with our parent community had we did that. So knowing your community is really essential in planning those trips, but it can go really wrong if you misjudge maybe the risk tolerance of your students and your family, and you can spend a lot of time convincing or having to change your plans completely. So I think this year we're fortunate that I think judged and planned appropriately for our students and our families.
That's a really interesting point there, Chris, you touched on about easing the anxieties of parents as well. Because I imagine if you are doing, a bigger trip for a week, a week without walls, there's quite a few things that could potentially go wrong. But also, if you plan correctly, then that will minimize all chances of that. And so, but how do you, for parents that are more anxious, how do you overcome those anxieties? Are there certain techniques that you've used that parents have responded to well?
I could.
Go ahead. You first, Matt.
No, you carry on. You were on a roll there. That's good.
Knowing what they want to know. For example, parents are really concerned about accommodation. So we often partner with Prem's visiting school program in Chiang Mai. That's one of our go-to grade 6 or 7 trips. It's close by. It's very safe. It's partnered with a school. They've got great security. Kids stay in a dorm. So just something simple like having pictures of the dormitory where they're going to say safe and clean, having pictures of the activities they're going to do. Parents get really worried when their kids are out on a boat. They think the worst, that it's going to be some rickety raft. So just being able to have those visuals to anticipate as a group that's leading a trip, what are the things the parents are really going to be worried about? Because safety is first and foremost their concern. For most of my grade 7s, this is going to be the first trip they've done without their parents. For about 2.5 years, Bangladesh was almost totally shut down and schools were closed due to the pandemic. So they were quite little kids, in grade 4 and grade 5, understandably weren't traveling without their parents. And so there is a lot of that anxiety. So getting all of your ducks in a row with a really clear plan, and then having a big parent informational session where you outline that and really cheerlead and get excited for it. Share that clear rationale and all of those wonderful pictures you have about what a safe and amazing experience it has. And then being really willing to engage with small groups or individual parents that have their own concerns or want to come and talk to you. So really just having an open door and making time for them, especially the very influential parents who might come forward sort of on behalf of the larger group because they feel more comfortable doing so, and helping to assure them, which then has that ripple effect of the rest of maybe the grade level getting on board with the trip. So I guess in short, just really good planning, anticipation of what parents want to know, and then just building that excitement. I talk to the kids all the time and say, wow, it's just 8 weeks away and we're going to be in Cambodia together. where I'm taking the ninth graders this year. Good planning and great communication will help to reduce a lot of the anxiety of parents.
Yeah, I think Chris hit that exactly dead on, exactly what I was going to say. As an outdoor provider now, from going from teaching to being almost on the other side of the fence, it's a very good thing to do, actually, if you ever think about making the change, because you have such an insight as a teacher for what you want from people, and a lot of it is that clarity and honesty. So with parents, I always do a PowerPoint, and Chris hit it on the head again. Just show them pictures, show them the environment that they're going to be in, show them the excitement that is produced by those images of the place that they're going to, and then the preparation behind that. Give the parents the risk assessments, give them the emergency plan, let them see who are your qualified first aiders on the team, let them see the expertise of the team leaders and the people that are going on that trip and are going to be leading that trip. Give them as much information as you can about it, even down to the menus.
Is really important. I'll add on that. You really, I live in a country that's predominantly Muslim, so is halal food available? There's a large Hindu population here. Are we going to have vegetarian food? You want to make sure that parents know that their kids are going to eat and enjoy the foods that they have. And so, yeah, I didn't mention food, but I smiled when he said it, because it is one of the most important things parents want to know. Is my kid going to get food that they like?
Yeah.
Right. Daniela, Kenny, any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, so we do have the risk assessments, and we run a briefing with parents to go through the risk assessment and the trip and the main reasons, and get everybody on board and excited about it. It's easy with the children. And we also have individual ones for special needs children, and we meet with individualized meetings with parents from those children. So it's a separate thing. So I think it also helps a lot, gives them like more security about what is happening, and they trust you. So it's easier.
Yeah. I was going to add a couple more. I think everything you've all said is spot on. Another couple things that I think are important are like a recce or a site survey with someone from the school, so that they can document it and, see the spot, see the hotel, see the restaurant, see the trails. And if the school can send someone for a couple of days to see it, if time allows for something like that, that's important. I've also led parent and trips. Like they've loved the kids love the trip so much that they get 2 or 3 families together and they want to do a trip. And I think that leads to the other thing, which we say we want a teacher as a champion. If you have a parent as a champion, that's worth gold, because they'll go and tell everybody, like, we've done this trip 5 times and we love it. And we've seen all kinds of cool animals, and we've rafted and we've hiked and we've ate delicious food. And then they sell it to the other parents. And I think that, everything that everyone else said combined with that, and you've got a winner. It's going to be a good formula.
Brilliant. And yeah, I mean, like you've all outlined, the benefits are just so, there's so many benefits for students to get them outdoors, to bridge that gap between learning in the classroom and outside, and that value is quite clear, I'm sure. And then sort of leading into how that fits into the curriculum and how selective universities view outdoor learning. It'd be great to get each of your thoughts around, is it seen positively from the university's perspective, and is it a genuinely valued part of the curriculum at schools for higher education institutions?
Yeah, so I could maybe start off with that. What on our expeditions, especially when you go to the Arctic with the Polaris teams, and you go to Peru and do some of the humanitarian aid based activities, they actually hold a great deal of value. The academic thing is great. There's a lot of competition in academia, but a lot of the top universities, they want to see young people that have an edge, and that edge is often in life experience. I'm not just talking about kind of like your generic trip to go here or to go there with a company that might just kind of churn young people through an activity, you want to try, certainly as a teacher, you want to try and create something really meaningful and impactful, and that makes connections between people and environments and kind of brings the whole thing together. Almost sounds a bit corny, really, but it can be very, very life-changing for everyone involved. And I know that probably all of you have seen that and can definitely testify of it. So if you do plan a trip that goes somewhere, or you're using somebody, this may not be something all the time, because you might have different objectives for different trips that go to different places. But on some of our places that we go to, we have real contacts with Indigenous people in those different areas, and we ask them what they need, and then the students will train and prepare and then go out and fulfill a real need, something that's actually worth something to the people they're helping, and then makes those genuine connections. And when you take that on a piece of paper via a reference written by one of your leaders or one of your teachers, talking about the character of that young person, some of their attributes and their qualities, about how honest they are, how hardworking they are, how compassionate they are, it's a really strong standing point for a young person to take to a further institute of education or an employer, and it makes them stand out.
Yeah, go
Okay.
ahead. I was just going to say, recently I've been writing some references for students to transfer back to American high schools. And one of the questions I'm seeing a lot is their leadership skills. And, I don't necessarily see that in my classroom, but what I can do is talk about their leadership skills in some of my extracurricular or some of my trips, and talk about how they really work well with their peers. They emerged as a leader during a trip. So I see a lot more value in that, because you don't always see it in a traditional classroom. And quite often, I definitely have lots of case studies where I've seen students that were not excelling in the classroom, but then they suddenly excelled in my life skills course. And that I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Now I know what you're really good at, and I can mention that. So I think it really has some value for that.
Absolutely. I was going to hit on that as well. I'm glad you mentioned that. It does give letter reference writers, particularly for U.S. admissions, where that holds a lot of weight, a lot more to talk about for students, particularly those that may not excel as much as their peers in a traditional classroom setting. But it also gives the students really something interesting to write about in their own admissions-based essays. Oftentimes admissions essays are very broad topics about, times they've overcome adversity or been challenged. And kids often write about very surface level stuff, the time that they had to run a lot in soccer practice or something like that. And it's kind of a blah essay. But adventure education experiences provide students with opportunities to challenge themselves in meaningful ways, and challenge them to be reflective and to support each other, and to step into leadership roles. Highly selective universities, everyone's got great grades, right? That's kind of a given with a university that accepts 2, 3, 4% of students. So they really are looking for that differentiation factor. They're looking to build kind of an interesting group of students that they bring in, and students who have those real life experiences, as Matt and Kenny touched on, and can write about that well, and talk about their experiences with some depth, are interesting, and perhaps give them that edge over a student who might have gotten a 45 out of 45 on their IB World exams and a near perfect score on their SAT, but doesn't have that extra layer of life experience or interesting times in their high school life.
I don't have a lot of experience with the university, but I can definitely say that the outdoors helps a lot with the developing social and emotional skills and the characteristics of effective learning that children should take throughout their education life, and real life. So definitely, I'm sure that it helps a lot, and it's going to make a difference in their future.
And just sort of moving on to the question of around, the fact that for schools and teachers that are sort of new to the concept of outdoor learning or learning outdoors, where might each of you advise that they start thinking about if they'd really like to develop, if they listen to this or they're thinking about it already, and they'd love to develop some kind of an outdoor learning program in their own school, especially if it's trickier in a more sort of heavily urban environment. Where might they start? Any thoughts or ideas about some advice that you might impart to someone that's getting inspired by this or is already thinking about it, and they don't know where to start? Any thoughts around that?
Yeah, I could start there. I've trained a lot of outdoor education leaders for many schools around the UK, and many of those have gone abroad to the international sector and taken that with them. And one of the things that I say to them often, to these teachers, to kind of when they start off with, I just ask them, what do you like? What do you like? What are you interested in? Or if you've got no skills whatsoever, what would you like to be? Skills would you like to gain? And often with teachers, because they're so busy and they have so much to do, if you give them something that can become a hobby for them, or they become very passionate about, that's a real key for the continuation. Chris mentioned this, in the international sector where you've got a turnover of teachers that's really high, how are you going to keep the sustainability of those activities moving forward year after year, so that your school is still being enriched after that teacher has left? And a lot of it is about, first of all, helping a teacher find a bit of passion, getting them the very best training that you can get them so that they're safe and they're proficient. Stay within the remit of that proficiency as they develop. So don't run before you can walk, kind of thing, and allow it to progress. Sometimes getting somebody like me in to the school and saying, let's, who's been doing this for many years, and get a bit of exterior help as well. That's always a really good thing. I myself, when I was a teacher, I would ask my leadership to send me on training courses, and I would say, I'll do this in my own time, or like what Kenny was saying, do it if the school can provide for it. Get on some training courses, get out there, and then disseminate what you've learned down to the students, and it brings the whole thing together. And if it's done sensibly and not too quickly, if you like, then it will be extremely safe, and there'll be a consistency of excellence that will just rise and rise.
I think a couple of really cool places to start are in your classroom. Set up a nature table or a nature corner. And so if you're a teacher and you go for hikes and you find, insects or skeletons or skulls or berries or twigs or leaves, just bring them in and get the students interested. And I think that works for all levels, primary, middle, and high school. Because if you find a snake skull out hiking, everyone's going to want to see it. And then once you get that reputation, people will start bringing things to you. And it happens to me all the time. People bring me cool things that they found over the weekend, and that gets people intrigued. And that can lead to more, like a weekend trip. So I think start there, bringing stuff into the classroom, do something on campus if your campus allows for it, or if not, go to a nearby park. But start small, like a half-day trip or a full-day trip, just a nature hike, or an observation type trip. And hopefully that can lead into, a longer type trip, a week without walls, or an education outside the classroom type experience. And the other one is, one way that I started when I moved to Asia. I didn't know anything about Southeast Asian ecology. So I looked for experts. I volunteered for the Malaysian Nature Society. I went with all the birders. I know that in Bangkok, there's a teacher that leads urban nature hikes. I know in China, people I've talked to, they have similar things, like people are leading nature hikes in the urban areas, looking for birds and insects and moss and trees, anything they can find. So clue into those type people that are experts and learn from them, and then bring all that back to your classroom and get your kids excited.
I agree with Kenny. I would go with the local, start small. And I think that's something that helps a lot as well, is when you have your block planning. So you can start thinking about trips and opportunities, experiences. I think that it also gives teachers time to plan and don't get so rushed, because we are busy planning and doing activities, and so many things happen. So I think that when we have time to think, plan ahead, and we know how things are going to happen, when it's going to happen, I think it's a good way to begin with.
Yeah, think strategically and systematically. Don't rush it, and start small. Start with the people that are really excited already, instead of trying to convince everyone that they have to plan something, because you'll face a lot of resistance when you're initially trying to build, a school culture that values the outdoors and experiential learning. But think about, where maybe does the school want to be in 1 year, 3 years, and 5 years? Where can stuff be intentionally embedded in the curriculum? Our grade 10 trip is going to Tioman Island in Malaysia, and it's an IB math and science interdisciplinary unit, where they're collecting data, kind of ecology based in mangroves and coral reefs and different biomes. So it has that clear curricular connection. Those teachers are on board with that, but then it also becomes something you do every year. We go to Tioman in grade 10. And it lives, well beyond the population of teachers that might come or go. Anything that you want to embed, you've got to value it, you've got to talk about it, and you've got to be strategic when planning it. So the parents are confident that it's going to be done and going to be done well.
Fantastic. And any other thoughts on that before we move on to the last question? And I think, Chris and Matt really touched on that piece around how to embed it sustainably into the curriculum. So it doesn't leave with one person. And like Matt said, the international school sector is quite transient and people move to every 2-3 years. So that, getting that knowledge going with one person is such a shame, isn't it? Especially if they put a lot of work in building up an outdoor learning program. So are there any other things that you can speak of, each of you, around how to genuinely embed a sustainable outdoor learning program into a school? Any other thoughts on that?
It's a question I ask when I'm recruiting, which is a huge portion of my every waking moment this time of year, trying to fill positions. I'm asking teachers about their experience and their comfort level, taking kids outside of the classroom, big and small. It doesn't mean necessarily flying to Malaysia, but science teachers that like to take kids outside of the classroom, or art, or whatever it might be, so that you're kind of looking for that as part of the recruitment process. I think that's one way that I try and embed it and make sure that it carries on. And also, as Matt said, building good relationships with experts, finding who's out there, vetting them carefully, of course, but then working with them year after year so that somebody coming in doesn't have to find somebody and do all that legwork. So establishing those relationships and the experts locally and maybe on a more international scale can take a lot of the heavy lifting off of teachers who are doing a ton of day-to-day work and teaching and assessing.
I think part of the problem with your question, Max, is you could spend hours actually talking about the answer to that. And Chris is in a great spot being leadership. I liked what he said about, he's looking for teachers that have extra. They're interesting people. They have extra skills and things like that. And Daniela also talked about, teachers are always planning. They'd love to always innovate outside of the box. But teachers, they are put in a box and they have to operate quite linearly down the line that they've been given by the senior leadership. So Chris's insight into that is, I think, really important for other leaders to kind of take on board, because at the end of the day, teachers, like what Kenny said about, starting a nature table in the class, any teacher can do that at any time. But if you want to embed a program into a school which is going to last and it's going to keep going, then people need to listen to what Chris said and think, right, okay, leadership, is the leadership going to allow time and money to produce something which is going to keep going. And the amount of time and money which is then given to that will determine how big that program can be and how sustainable it's going to be as well.
Sorry, Daniela, Kenny, any other final thoughts on that, building a sustainable model?
I think one thing that is crucial, and it's a pragmatic thing, is getting it on the annual calendar. And I think every school has a calendar phase where they put, their trips on. And once it's on the calendar, it kind of lives there forever until someone says, oh, why don't we take this off? So I think that's a pragmatic sort of, if it's on the calendar, it's going to happen.
And I also think that when it's part of the curriculum, it also helps. So it's in the calendar, it's in your planning, and it's part of the curriculum. It's one of the expectations to go outdoors, to plan those kind of activities, to bring real life experience to children. So I think it also helps a lot.
Fantastic. And yeah, sadly, that brings us to the end of the conversation. But it's been absolutely fascinating. Yeah, I mean, even when I, personally speaking, when I was young, I remember going out in primary school and secondary school. The odd time that we did go out and have trips outdoors, it was always very memorable and has stuck with me. So yeah, it's genuinely inspiring. So I hope educators around the world are going to be inspired by listening to your guys' experiences. And yeah, maybe we can do a part 2. And thank you all again for your time.
Yes, thank you. Thanks to everyone for their expertise and ideas. I definitely have learned a lot from your different perspectives.
Yeah, thank you guys. Really appreciate it.